So most people know, well, that have looked into anything about the story of Donald Trump's, the old aunts in Scotland and the Hebrides. Marianne McLeod, who was Donald Trump's mother, they had brought revival back to the Hebrides by like nonstop praying. That's all they did, nonstop praying. And I'm wondering if they did that because a lot of it was because their economy was bad. There was nothing flourishing. It was just, there was no godliness. Maybe it's because, all the fairies. Because it was saturated in the British Isles, which is the Hebrides and all that. It was saturated in Wales. It was saturated everywhere. People would go fishing and they would hear the little fairies. They'd repeat stuff over and over again. But it also goes back to your globalists because it is a religion. Because that's why they worship the creation. I mean, everybody's seen what the fairies, So just a little bit more. In Britain, fairies filled the landscape. They haunted rivers and seas, the air, and the earth beneath your feet. Almost anything strange in nature belonged either to the fairies or the devil. People saw them, heard them, and even smelled them. Yes, I guess they would smell like sour. It was a sour smell. In Wales, they appeared at local markets and forced up prices. Yes, apparently they were responsible for inflation. Sightings of fairies in the British countryside have been recounted by most unlikely witnesses well into the era of living memory. In Ireland especially, fairy paths, trees, and forts were treated with intense reverence. If you accidentally built your house across a fairy path, you might slice a corner of the building or abandon it altogether. And it was in Ireland that folklore met the strangest fringes of real terror, for the many disturbances credited to angry fairies were in fact the work of real poltergeists. Yeah, it was this guy from university was talking about it, how it ends up tying into much of the poltergeists. And that's where this comes from. It is. It's where it all comes from. I mean, so it was so saturated that it was everywhere. Yeah, look at the little Christmas elves. Yeah. Back when my nephews were little, I used to move because I lived with them when I was in nursing school with my sister. I would move their little hairy elf all over the place. I even the next year brought in miniature elves. They were the new trainees. I loved coming up with stuff. I mean, I would hang stuff from the ceiling off of the house and put flour all over the table, and then have the little elves do angel. Yeah, maybe I shouldn't have been doing that. But it's all goes to that. Your Christmas elf. I mean, obviously, it was, who knows? It's just, I wonder if that's why Marianne McLeod's aunts, who were McLeods, they spent 4 hours at a time, each of those two old aunts. You can go read that story. And then a pastor came in, a couple of pastors, and they were determined to get God to bring down the Holy Spirit. So they took, and they did. It happened. It was the biggest revival. It was like in the 40s, late 30s or 40s, something like, no. Yeah, it was something like that. It was, and the Bible that those two old aunts gave Marianne McLeod, Donald Trump's mother, she ended up passing on to Donald Trump. Fairies, elves, and fawns. These would be your fawns. They would be like part animal. Yeah, where have we seen that a million times before? Like on every record album. Beyonce comes to mind most recently. So the reason this goes back to it's a religion. Is it the people, the globalists, they worship the creation, okay? It's a big no-no. It's not that you should trash the creation, but they do actually trash it. But that's what they worship. That's why I've said you got to be very careful about some of those paths that tell you, you know, you have to honor the earth and stuff. Be careful there. I mean, it sounds like, oh, that seems right. Yeah, but it just be careful, because it's a religion. Here's why. This is why the Rothschilds had these parties. This is why they still have these type parties where, to most of us normal people, these costumes seem strange, like something you would never even come up with. Because they're globalist. They worship the creation. They don't worship God. So when you look at your secret societies, okay, they are a bit concerning, but what can you do about them? You don't want to have witch hunts again, because that's just wrong, you know. But that said, that's why secret societies are rather concerning. And there's nothing you can really do about it. But it's because if it goes back to the occult, this is what it goes back to. So then when you have the occult running your government, well, that's why we've gotten into the mess we're in. I mean, this is the Rothschild parties. Anybody who's even semi-awake, you've come across, it's the Rothschilds. Yeah, well, no, it's not just, it's a whole bunch. It's the people that worship the creation. Likely they've invoked fairies all over the place. Who knows, you know? I mean, at this point, who knows what? All I know is that God's going to have to clear the place out. Interesting that Donald Trump used the word swamp, because, again, they went underground. And they have, like, underground to where they have whole cities underground. They just have their own world underground. But then they come above ground for certain things, if you know what I mean. This is from the Rothschild parties. Yeah, like the strangest costumes, because it's a religion. And though that religion goes back, I would say, to most of your environmentalists. Don't start attacking me. Well, nobody will see my video anyway. I'm so locked down, nothing is getting seen, nothing. Like, they really, really are clamping down now. But the environmentalists, the radical ones, they're globalists. Most of them go back to the global. So they worship the creation. Here's proof. Finding climate solution in fairy tales. That's where fairy tales came from. In fact, with the MacLeod's history, theirs goes back to that one of the MacLeods, if I have this correct, impregnated one of the fairies, but they couldn't stay together. The fairy had to go back to fairyland, and so she had the baby. Then she had to go back, but she told him, you know, the person she fell in love with, the MacLeod, she said, that baby can never cry, because if that baby ever cries, I will hear it and I will immediately come back. And it happened one night when, like, the nanny was away, and the sound of the baby went up, and the fairy mother came back down, and then she was rocking the baby, and she, like, left it this blanket. Yeah, it's part of the MacLeod's history. They have, and again, they have the fairy flag, and there's something else. So they obviously, this is part of their history. I'm just wondering if Mary Ann MacLeod, who clearly was, you know, a Christian, you know, is that why maybe they weren't thriving? Because she did, those two old aunts, they did, with them and some few others, that God, Holy Spirit poured down to people that were riding their bike on the street. Go read that story. So, yeah, so the Commonwealth, I think there's a reason Donald Trump was saying this, because they are the globalists who worship the creation.